English language and composition students, welcome to lesson 51, our second multiple choice test practice, and this will be part one. There'll probably be 3 or 4 parts to it. So here we go. This is the first passage, and I just want to help you to get used to finding key ideas, key wording, and so on. Before we look at any of the questions and answers, right? So it's just I'm just gonna point out some key things to notice. All right. So what do we have as a pattern in the passage? Well, sometimes if you're having a hard time with the passage and you're not getting the meaning of it, though I don't really think that'd be the case here, but you could look at the questions. So I'm not going to flip there right now, but for instance, question 4 mentions a paradox. So what I'm saying is you could look at the questions if you're having a little bit of time, a difficult time with the passage, look to the questions kind of quickly. You don't have much time. But you see paradox for number 4, you see number 6, abrupt shift between paragraphs 1 and 2. Well, it gives you something to work with, you know. But then you've got to get back to the passage pretty quickly. So what are we seeing happening here? Basically in this passage we're seeing contrasts, right? So even right away we see it. Stern and somber are not very welcoming, not very friendly, and they're on the negative side. This is on the positive side. All right, we have stern and somber, and then we have beautiful. So we have a lot of conflicting ideas already. And so that's the pattern that goes through the whole passage. We see words like distrustful in line 5, right? So you see that? And then we see frown a little ways down. And then we see beautiful again. So down here, it might be difficult for you to see, but beautiful in line 9. So, you know, strange shifting back and forth. And then we get to, but I think the AP scores, or the AP College Board, probably put this passage first because it's the easiest maybe of all the passages of this collection in this test. But anyway, we have a mention of a lot of features in Florence, Italy, in Tuscany. The Palazzo Vecchio, that means Old Palace, the great tower of the Palazzo Vecchio. Now, there is no such place as the Castle of Otranto, but it's mentioned with ponderous gloom, right? So let's keep that in mind because there's a question on that. And then we have other descriptions like fading and tarnished and so on about the courtyard of the Palazzo Vecchio. So moving on. So we have that main building described first, and it's very gloomy. Then we move on. So around line 15, line 16 actually, is a mention of a prison. So then we have the prison. So basically, if you're paying attention, there's one big building, it's described, and now another. And it's foul and dismal. It's not a very pleasant place. And the prisoners, there's a question on this, smoke the while to purify the air. Do you remember that question about paradox? That's it right there. Something that's seemingly illogical, but it does make sense in the situation. You know, it's rancid, smelling or putrid smelling, and so they smoke. It probably masks the odors. So it does make sense, but it seemingly doesn't make sense. Now, this is not a nice place. However, the jailer comments, they are merry enough, senor, says the jailer. What? It's squalid, it's dirty, and they're merry. Right? So, doesn't quite make sense. So again, what are we having? Two buildings described, two places, and a lot of conflicting description. So right after Mary, we have their blood stained. That doesn't seem to go well either. And finally they bring in a man who is extremely old, and he has just killed a teenager, a teenage girl. That's a big dichotomy there. That's a big difference. And why would such an old man be committing murder on the streets, you know? It's very quizzical. So we have this mysterious sort of sense, maybe tone, mysterious tone. So if you were to write about something like this, there's a lot of ironic juxtaposition, is how you could term it. Even so, you're getting a lot of benefit by just talking about this passage, because you would think through these sort of things if you were to write an analysis about it. So he stabs her dead, but the marketplace is full of bright flowers. Extreme dichotomy again. All right, so moving to the last paragraph. Now, there's really a flow through this whole passage. There's nothing too surprising. There is an abrupt shift, maybe because we're not so negative in this part of the, there's no transition or something, but we're just moving to a new physical structure in the city, right? So bridges. And we had Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace. Now we have the Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge. But it is the most noticeable bridge because it's covered with buildings. All right, and then that ends with across the top of that bridge there is a gallery or a covered walkway, and then there's a description of it using a word that we're not quite used to nowadays in the way that it's used here. There's a question on that word. A secret passage, it takes its jealous course. This was written by Charles Dickens, so it was in the Victorian era in the second half of the 19th century. So probably in the 1860s or so. That word meant something different denotatively back then. It doesn't mean you're possessive and envious in this situation. It means, it just actually is repeating this idea. All right? So we should get it from context. So when you answer that question. So now let's go into, I won't have time to go over everything, or we would have about 10 parts to this video. So I'm just going to go over some of the questions more carefully. Okay. So, we've already gone over this. Things that are, it's like a split. Things that don't go together. So, yeah, vocabulary is important, but just by paying attention to this video, taking these tests, going over the answers, not just in the video, but reading them, the answer explanations, you can pick up a lot of vocabulary, be helpful for you. Well, rhetorical strategies, that was part of our curriculum already this year. Are there a series of situations? No, there's just, it's not, he's maybe building a case for the mystery of Florence, but that's not his main purpose. So remember, multiple choice on the AP test, it's the best answer. Some are true, but maybe they're not the most true. He's not breaking things apart. He's not explaining how to operate something. how to do something. It's all description. Pretty easy. There is no chronological order here for that. Paradox, we went over that before. That's why I like to do it ahead of time. They smoke to purify the air. Now, if you're paying attention and you want to see if you're on the right track to getting the right answers, we have the word dichotomy. It's things that don't go together. We have the word contrast here. And in the next question, we have an abrupt shift. So there's a lot, even in number 8. Antithetical images, right? And that's our answer there. Antithesis is opposites. So if you're very good with your vocabulary, you can kind of connect the dots and say, oh, I think that's the right answer. You know, maybe another one's close. But because it repeats the dichotomy and the contrast idea in E here, you know you're on the right track if you're getting all answers that have the same sort of idea. Okay. I better check the time. Oh, we got time. So. Okay. So we are going to move on to number 6. I think this passage is so simple once you get the hang of it that we don't need to spend too much time on the questions. Maybe this one is a little difficult. The abrupt shift, no transition between the paragraphs. So it does all of these things except for B. Because there is a connection between the two paragraphs. It just wasn't smoothed by a transition. It's just the new structure to describe, right? So just because there's a lack of transition between the paragraphs, that's not, it does all of these things, but it doesn't do this, because this is not true, okay? There is a connection. We're just going to our next structure in the city. Yes, we should be able to figure this out. We have battlements and so on. Florence had experienced both warfare and intrigue is our answer. Battlements and distrustful. So the words just point to this answer. Antithetical images means opposites. We went over that a little bit. Okay. So I'm not going to look back to that detail there, but the whole passage is antithetical. If one were building a house of horrors, for number 9, which of the following would be best suitable as a model or inspiration? Well, Dickens describes the Palazzo Vecchio as a mysterious place like the Castle of Otranto. So that's what we're supposed to take, that it's like a house of horrors. So we would pick that. These are all places that are really in. This one is not. It's an allusion to something else, probably, I think, by Poe, maybe. Edgar Allan Poe. And I already went over this, right? This doesn't mean now. It means maybe more envious, possessive, but then it was more on the secret side. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop this video right now, and I'll start another one for the next passage.